Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I've found along the way. This podcast is brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley podcast show. Today, I'm so thrilled to introduce Walt Rakowich on my show. He is calling in from Naples, Florida, but he's based in Colorado. He has an amazing experience and career, like just swoon level when it comes to real estate and real estate investment. As the co-CEO of Prologis, they have over $150 billion in assets they manage. They're a publicly traded company, part of the S&P. They're part of the S&P 500 and have just had this crazy success story. Walt, we're so thrilled to have you on and so excited to learn a little bit from you. Our listeners are often really high-performing entrepreneurs and investors, and I'm sure they'd love to hear about all of the value proposition that Prologis and your company provides. I'd love to have you start off by sharing a little bit about you and what got you into this background. How did you find yourself being the CEO of such a titan of industry situation? This is so exciting.
Well, Lindsay, what got me back? Well, first of all, I grew up, I'm an East Coaster guy. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I was a grandson to some European immigrants that came over over to the United States. And I always say, I was fortunate to hit the parent lottery. I just had some great parents, and they didn't have a lot of financial wealth as some of your clients would, but they had a lot of wealth of love and support. And that really, kind of shaped my journey in life, and particularly my leadership journey. How did I get to Prologis, I think is your question, but I guess my background is that I went to Penn State University and graduated with an accounting degree, got out and actually put on the green eye shade and became an accountant for 4 years. And that was interesting, but not where I wanted to land long term. And I was fortunate enough to get into Harvard Business School and got an MBA, lived 2 years in Boston. And then after that, ultimately, I had some time to really think about what I wanted to do during that 2 years. And I always tell people I would have been a horrible software developer because I got to do something I can see. And real estate was something I could see. I could build it and I could watch it go up, or I could acquire it and see it every day. And I just loved real estate as an investment, perhaps just because of the tangibility of it all, But anyway, I started working for this company called Trammell Crow Company, and you may be familiar with them. They were,
yes,
I think, the largest real estate developer in the world in the 80s and the 90s, and I worked for them for 10 years in Los Angeles, and I worked at the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles, and that's where 40% of all shipments come into and out of the United States. And so, needless to say, there's a lot of warehouses there. And so I started to cut my teeth in the warehouse business. And ultimately, after 10 years being there, I went to work for Prologis. And Prologis is a REIT, a real estate investment trust, that just invests in distribution facilities, i.e. warehouses. That's what they do. And they own, today the company owns over $150 billion in warehouses, and one of the largest real estate companies in the world. I cut my teeth there, became a regional director, and then became chief financial officer, then ultimately the president, chief operating officer, and then CEO. And so it was a really great 20-year ride with the company. I've been retired now for several years, so I'm no longer with the company, but that's kind of I guess you never know how you're going to get. I mean, if somebody would have asked me, do you think you'll be in the warehouse business someday? And I was in college, I was like, well, what is that? I
Yeah.
guess you never really know, right? So that's kind of how I got there.
How phenomenally eye-opening for someone who's not from that sector or really has not a lot of experience or insight to understand that one of the largest REITs on planet Earth comes from warehouse facilities. I
Warehouse,
mean,
right?
it
That's
just it amazes me. I think there's so much incredible value out there in places where people just would totally underestimate.
yes,
I met a family the other day that has multi-billion dollar multi-generational dynastic wealth from inventing like the strips on the back of credit cards. Like they have a
mm,
fraction of a royalty for every credit card ever made, and you just think like,
right.
who would have thought? So it's interesting. How fascinating did you when you were so you first understood the industry on an operational level from your first job,
I did.
and how well did that prepare you then? I would imagine just significantly to really understand when you got on the investment side because you understood maybe components that truly investors wouldn't understand from having all that inside tactical knowledge.
Yeah, that's really an insightful comment. And honestly, a lot of people hadn't asked me that question before, but it's so true. I was really fortunate when I was asked to become the chief financial officer. I had already built buildings, leased buildings, managed buildings, and invested in buildings for 20 years at that point in time in my career. And so I became the CFO. And when it came time to being on the street and talking to sell side analysts, buy siders, rating agencies, bondholders, and the like, I mean, I really understood the nuts and bolts of the real estate itself. I wasn't just a financial guy. And in fact, it was really uncomfortable for me because I had been really an operating guy that was asked to be a CFO. But then ultimately, when I became CEO of the company, it really did serve me well to understand the nuts and bolts of the business. It was so critically important. Which is not to say that good CEOs can't come from the financial, side of the business and not have operating experience. I think they can, but certainly if you have both, it's really a good combination.
That's so exciting. In building this company, so you started out as a regional manager, you said, and then went straight to CFO.
I was a CPA and I, had an accounting degree. So I understood that side of the business that reports to the CFO as well. And so that probably helped. It's funny how these steps kind of build on themselves in your career, right?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, like you said, you didn't set out for this trajectory. You just put one foot in front of the other. It sounds like following
Right.
opportunity and passion, working hard. So with you, were you when you said you retired? How long have you been retired, Walt?
Well, I've been retired now a little over 10 years. So I sit on mostly what I do today, and I'm sure we'll get into this maybe later, but I sit on corporate boards and I spend a lot of time giving back. So I'm sure there'll be a question or two on that too. But yeah, I retired at the ripe old age of 55, and I've been fortunate enough to have this time in my life when I still can walk around and have a lot of energy to give back.
How beautiful, Walt. So tell me, you're on several boards. Tell us a little bit about the boards you're on. Are they all publicly traded? Are they all in the real estate investment industry?
Both. There's three boards that I'm on. One is Host Hotels, which is the largest owner of public company, owner of hotels in the world, and they are an offshoot of when Marriott split the company several years ago. The Marriott that is a service company. They don't own many hotels, and then they spun out all of their hotels into a REIT, and that's the board that I'm on. It's called Host Hotels. Day one, it was called Host Marriott Hotels, but they own a lot of other hotels other than Marriott's today. I'm also on the board of Iron Mountain, which is uh, most people know it as a record storage company, but it's really become a technology company now in terms of storing records and building facilities actually that store the cloud. And then I'm on the board of Ventas, Ventas. They're one of the largest owners of assisted living facilities in the United States. So Those three boards are all S&P 500 companies, all companies of size. And, it's plenty of work being a director in those companies.
Oh, so much work. How exciting. So they're very diverse. I mean, there's still, like you said, tangible assets. You've got hotels, you have buildings that are dealing with with the elderly and
Yes.
helping care. And then
Yep.
the third one is more along the lines of your track record. In the case of all of these projects, is there just like deep commonalities that make you the strategic board member, or is it just your wizardry with pencil whipping and understanding financials? Do you find that there's traversing knowledge and insight that you bring to the table on all those?
Well, I think they're all, first of all, they're all technically real estate investment trusts, even though I remind business, they happen to own real estate, but they're really more in the service business. But so they're all REITs. And so that is my expertise, and they all own real estate, which is really, really important. But the other thing is that they all want people that have run companies. That's certainly something that they treasure, and then to be a former CFO as well is kind of an added benefit, especially on audit committees and the like. So there's probably a number of reasons why I check certain boxes.
Incredible. Well, and you talked about giving back. So can you share with us? We have a lot of listeners that run their own companies and have corporate social responsibility arms or their own foundations. Can you share a little bit about with each of these companies and your past work for just like what you've done in terms of giving on a corporate level? And I'd love to hear more about what you do on a personal level as well. But first, kind of helping us understand any of the strategic giving or community impact aspects of what you guys do from the business side of things.
That's really a great question. I'm going to tell you a quick story. When I actually became president of the company before I was CEO, my, if you will, social responsibility and feeling like I had, and it could have an impact through our company socially, began with a second grader in an inner city school. I was asked by a friend of mine to teach junior achievement, and I said, "Well, I don't. That's fine. I'll teach some junior achievement with you." I said, "But I'm only going to do it if we do it in the inner city. I want to do it with kids that really need to hear our message." And so we picked an inner city school, and we went there, and we started off. It was a second grade class, and we talked about what we did in our career. The teacher asked us to tell the kids what we did. And I didn't really know how to describe being a president of a large public company. So I said, well, my company actually builds buildings. And this little girl tugged on my, all the kids were like sitting around us. And this little girl tugged on my pair of pants. And she said, Mr. Walt, she said, you build buildings? I said, yes. She said, can you build my grandmother and I a home to live in?
Oh, Walt, no.
It absolutely killed me, right? That this girl was asking me to build her a house. And the teacher, thank God, intervened immediately. And she said, well, houses aren't the things that Mr. Walt builds. He builds other kinds of buildings. So unfortunately, he cannot. But, I went back to the office and I said, you know what? We have 350 people working in this particular office. And I started realizing, and more talked to employees, they all wanted purpose and meaning in their life. They really did. And they wanted to gain purpose and meaning out of, when you think about it, we spend 60 to 70% of our waking hours at work. And right. And so, yes, you can give back on Saturdays and Sundays, but the truth is that most of us have kids, or we have husbands and wives, and we've got personal lives, and there's just not a lot of time. So I began to think, we really need to provide our employees with opportunities to give back in the world or in the various communities that we're in. And so we we designed a program where we were going to, at that point in time, the only thing we had on our table was, let's do junior achievement, but let's do junior achievement in the inner city. So we immediately, out of 350 people, we had 175 people sign up and started teaching. And and every year they would put down how important that was, that, we would provide them with that opportunity. So then we had over 100 offices globally, in Japan and in France and UK and everywhere. And so I started to become a missionary about this, and went around. I said, you know what? You might not have junior achievement in Japan, but you got something. And I think we're going to make it mandatory. We gotta get our employees involved. And so the people in Japan started saying, well, we're clean people. We don't have inner city stuff like you have in the United States, but we can be clean. And so let's go to the cities that we do business in, and let's do a clean day and clean those cities. And the people in France say, well, the government pays for all that, but what we can do is we can raise money and have bike-a-thons, and the French just love the bike. And all of a sudden, people throughout the world started to get into it, and they loved their employer, because their employer provided them with the meaning and the purpose that they were looking for, right? And it even added to our retention as a company. And so I started looking at that, and everybody talks about ESG today. Well, environmental, social, and governance, and that's a big deal. But, really social is not defined the way I just defined it. It's defined more as diversity and inclusion, and making sure that our hiring practice we hire X amount of females and X amount of, whatever. And I think that's great. Don't get me wrong, but companies need to have a social, the way you and I would think of a social responsibility in their communities, where they're having their employees work with their hands and actually go and give of their time, treasure, and talent in the various communities they're in. And I'll tell you what, it was the greatest thing for our retention, and really the greatest thing for our hearts, to provide that for our employees.
Incredible, Walt. So you were the first in the leadership inside Prologis to really build this kind of employee volunteerism platform. Is that right? You kind of initiated all that from the company.
Well, I like to think that it had a lot to do with me, but it takes a lot of people to get that going. And so I had a lot of great teammates to help out.
How beautiful. I love that. I love that your purview, as you think about giving back, there's tremendous value for those who are the recipients of the outcome, but like you were focusing on the value it gives to the giver and for the employees itself, and that purpose-driven identity and culture inside your company. And, the research is totally definitive on this. Like, it absolutely does help with company culture, with retention. It helps with the mental health of employees. It helps with interpersonal conflict and resolution. There's so many aspects about it that are just like, this is just good for your business, So doing good is good for business is what we always say. So I love that, Walt. And then, so did your company do any like giving? Did they have any like a bucket of money where there was like, hey, we can actually donate to certain organizations or causes outside of the employee engagement?
Yeah. So everything that was decided on as to where we would give our time, and every city was different. The company would support that out of the foundation. So we would gift to those organizations as well. And we also had, we had the traditional matching programs where if somebody gave up to a certain amount, we would match whatever they wanted to give into whatever the organizations were. Absolutely. We did a plethora of different financial things to back the things that we were also doing with our hands.
Beautiful. How cool. Do you have a favorite, like a pet project or a pet initiative or something you personally were like, this was something I'm super proud of all the things you did over those 20 years?
Wow, that's a really good question. I have personally, we started giving to a certain charity in Denver. And I have to admit, I've really sort of developed a passion for it. We in Colorado, it's called Colorado Uplift, but we've taken it to I think 17 or 18 cities now in the United States. So we've grown, But what we do is we go into the inner city schools and we teach kids about what it means to live a life of character. So we actually start in the fourth grade and we teach all the way through senior year. And it is an elective course. And the principals generally tell us the kids that they would want to be in these classes, because a lot of times they have a lot to do with the financial or the lack of financial support that they have at home, and perhaps the situation that their parents are in. So they recommend these kids, and they don't get a lot of direction at home, these kids. And so we teach them from the fourth grade through the 12th grade what it means to live a life of character. And literally, we teach them 5 days a week. And so this past year, we taught over 4,000 kids in the city of Denver. And I like to think that has a major impact. We're trying to grow the organization. And as I said, we've taken it to, I think it's 16 or 17 cities now in the United States. We partner with other organizations, but it's actually our employees that go in and teach the selective class in schools. And yeah, I'm especially proud of that organization. It's called Colorado Uplift in Denver.
How beautiful. I love your heart, Walt. I love that you love like the tangible human interaction and you're so passionate about children. And what you just mentioned about teaching character. One of my mentors, his name was Joe Ritchie. He passed away a couple of years ago. Just the sweetest man. I talk about him a lot on the show, just because when people talk about things that are meaningful, it reminds me of him. He was like a father figure to me. But one of the things he did, he was he was the greatest options trader who ever lived. And after he sold his company, which was called the Chicago Research and Trading Firm, he actually invested in publicly traded companies based on the CEO's character. He didn't look at like market verticals or trajectories or any of the things that an analyst would normally look at. He wanted to know qualitatively, which in enough data actually becomes quantitative, the character of the CEO. So like they did research on like how do they treat their secretary or their spouse? How do they handle failure? What kind of corporate social responsibility programs? And you would have been one of the people he would have absolutely delighted in investing in. And so, yeah, in fact, I'm sad he's not here because he would have been somebody I would have introduced immediately. But he talks about this character that the scarcest commodity on planet Earth is actually human capital, but it's human beings that are high capacity and high character. You know, if you can find someone like you, Walter, that's just kind of proven themselves capacity wise, like the things you've accomplished, the outcomes you've had, the trajectory of leadership and stewardship that you've had is unprecedented. You're an outlier. But then to have this personal passion about character and living it out in this way. Tell us a little bit about what qualities do you hope you embodied as a CEO or of other leaders around you that you really admired that you consider high character qualities or values that you kind of put on as like, I mean, I feel like sometimes listeners, maybe it's not as tangible as like talking about specific strategies for investing in a REIT, but it's like at the end of the day, I can't think of anything more important for all of us to remember. I think sometimes things that we think are sophomoric or kind of fluffy, it's like everything. I guarantee there's a reason you were able to accomplish what you did, and it was because you lived by these values. So can you share with us a little bit, about what matters most? If you have children or grandchildren, what you'd want to sit down and instill in them most about the values as a leader that you valued.
And I'm going to tell a quick story to you. We really haven't covered this at all, but in my case, I took over the company. I had actually left the company, and because I had major disagreements with the CEO. And I left the company for 9 or 10 months, and the stock had plummeted about 95%. I think we were the third worst performing stock in the S&P 500 in 2008.
I think I read this. I read this story. This is amazing. I'm excited you're sharing this. Yeah.
No, that's okay. And I won't go into much of the details about it. But anyway, the board had asked me to come back and turn around the company and let go of the CEO. My predecessor CEO after I had left. And I did end up coming back and to run the company. And in the first month that I was there, I received a call from John Mack, who was the CEO of Morgan Stanley at the time. and we had been one of Morgan Stanley's larger clients, and John, was concerned about, how I was doing personally and how the company was doing personally and the like. And he and I talked a little bit, and I said, John, obviously very difficult times. And by the way, during the same time, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs were rumored to be going bankrupt as well. So we were all getting painted in this front page article in the Wall Street Journal on us, and it didn't help that it talked about us potentially going bankrupt. And so it was a really very stressful time for me. But anyway, I asked John, I said, John, I just want to know, like, how are you managing through this? How are you getting through it? He said, Walt, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to write this down. I said, okay. He said, the best leaders manage on the basis of the 3 H's. And now he had me intrigued. I said, okay, try me on. He goes, the best managers and people that you ought to be looking for that are out there lead with humility. They lead with honesty. And then he said, in this day and age, a banker needs to have a sense of humor. So I would put humor in his.
I love it. Those are easy to remember.
I went back, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a pretty spiritual guy, and I went back and I started to, put my head in the Bible and, started thinking about, okay, what's the person I want to be? And I realized that what he really meant by humor was to be human. In other words, the reason you walk in a room and you crack a joke from time to time, you lighten the room, is you want all your people to realize that you're human and they can relate to you. And so my 3 H's, and of course, I wrote a book after I left Prologis. It's called Transfluence. And in that book, I talk about the importance of, in your business career, of being humble, brutally honest, and human. Now, those 3 words might sound really simple. And most people would say that they are. But actually, and I write about the dangers of pride and fear in the book. And in particular, pride. There's a lot of people that are very prideful and feel great about sort of the fact that now they've reached the pinnacle of their career and they're now leading people, and they can be really prideful of it, and they lack humility. But if you ultimately want to lead people, there's got to be a humility about you, because the most important thing is you give credit to everybody else, not yourself. And that's how you create trust in your organizations. And so, to answer your question, the virtues that I look for in people are humility, honesty, and some level of humanness. Humility is a little bit about how you see yourself. Humanness is a little bit about how you see others. And honesty is the transaction that connects the two. And I just think that those are really words that I try, at least, to live out every day. It's not always possible. Sometimes my head gets a little bit too big. Sometimes I get a little bit too harsh, and my compassion's not there on the human side. And but I try every day to live those 3 virtues out.
Oh, Walt, you're so yummy. This is what I think. Everything about you just said was so beautiful. I want to, we need to put that in a caption and share that with the world. I hope your family and friends get to hear you talk about this regularly, but I can't wait to read your book. Is it something I can find on Audible? I'm a total Audible listener and learner. Incredible. I'm going to download this today.
The name of the book is Transfluence. And transfluence, believe it or not, is not a word in the dictionary. You would think it would be. Transfluent is, but not transfluence. And we came up with that word because it stands for transformational influence. And the tagline, really, if you will, what the book is about, as a leader, we all have really important things to accomplish, right? I mean, and the first things you think about is growing profitability or cutting costs or, hiring more people or, those are the objectives that everybody knows about. But I believe that the number one objective as a leader is to influence the people that are around you, and to be in essence, the question is, how do you make them work harder? How do you make them, not make them, but how do you get them? How do you get the most out of them? And you get the most out of them by caring about them and showing them that you love them. And so the most important thing that you have as a leader is the influence that you have on the people around you every day. And I tell people, it's not about your objective of profitability is the final objective. Okay. The real objective, most important thing is the journey in getting there. Okay. Because the journey is about how you change lives of the people that you work with, how you influence them to be better people. That is why we're at work. And I guarantee you that when you leave work 5-10 years later, that's going to be the only thing you remember. You don't remember about the profitability in any one year. You just remember your friends and the impact that you made on their lives. And so that's what the book is really about, that. And the underlying premise is, it's not about you. It's not about, but it is about the influence you can have on other people. So go out and get it.
I love that. Transfluence. That was the first thing you said. I'm like, am I hearing this word right? I've never heard this word. I love that you made it up and took those two words together. That's so clever and powerful. I can't wait to read this book. So, I mean, tell me a little about, I love that you're a man of faith. I have a massive spiritual background too. And it's everything to me, kind of the foundation of everything I try to do and be a part of. Tell me a little bit about your background in coming to wanting to write this book, and like how, how precious you can leave these principles. Do you have children and grandchildren or family?
I do have. I have a granddaughter. She was just born last year, so she's one. And I have a daughter and I have a son. My daughter's married. My son is single. But what got me to write the book is really interesting. When I took my first job out of college, it was 1979. So it just seems like I'm a dinosaur at this point in time. But back then, leadership was very much command and control. Yeah, I was happy to be employed. Leadership paid very little attention to culture. The word culture meant something in a petri dish. It had nothing to do with, work culture. And, honestly, leadership was granted to those people who waited around long enough back then. It was not merit based. It was, it was the time that you were there, and there was no social media, and it was very difficult to be vocal about anybody. And basically it was transactional. I collected a paycheck and I did a job. Well, today it's different. I remember asking my daughter before she took her first job out of college, I said, why'd you pick the company you picked? And she said, because I think there's a cultural fit. It wasn't the company that paid her the most money. It was a company that there was a cultural fit. When I took over as CEO, and this is in 2008, so it's now 15 years ago, but nonetheless, we had the internet and all that. The day I took over, and the company was supposedly going bankrupt, but I probably received 1,000 urgent calls between, equity and bond holders and sell-side analysts and, rating agencies. Even the mayor of Denver, where I live, called me up, and everybody was demanding answers. Even our employees, like, are you guys going to make it? This and that, and you just and online chats were rampant about our future and my future in leadership, and our employees wanted answers. It was like you just get barraged, and it, you come to realize that we live in a world with greater access to information, more diversity in people, and accelerating progress. And, I call them climates in the book. It's like climates have changed. Everything's just, rapid. But they really create challenges for leaders. And the truth of the matter is that we all live in glass houses now, where everybody can see everything you do, and they'll be critical of it. And so I just think it really requires a different leader today. I think it requires a more constant drumbeat of communication from leaders, transparency from leaders. I talk a lot about the importance of transparency in the book. I think it requires values-based leadership where it didn't in the past. You could get away with a lot more as a leader. Leaders need to lead by examples today because people are watching them. And I also think that it requires leadership that has the human element of it. And otherwise, you're not going to hold on to your people. People are like, you know what? I don't want to work for this guy anymore. Or I don't want to work for this company anymore unless it has X. And 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 so I just felt strongly when I left Prologis that I wanted to write a book about these things, about leadership. I wanted to talk about it openly in the marketplace. And so I wrote the book, and, I have my own podcast now, and I've written a bunch of blogs, and, and it's been wonderful. It really has. It's been wonderful getting the message out.
Incredible. I think it's so wonderful that you have such a heart for communicating the things that you know have made your life better and bless the lives of people around you, because I can't think of anything more powerful to share than ideas, really that are really worth sharing. So while you're talking about your personal philanthropy, so my background is in consulting and social good, and I've helped high net worth families and celebrities and multinational corporations and NGOs and institutions with their giving and making it a meaningful impact. And it's been such a blessing in my life. It's made my life be filled with so much rich meaning. I've met some of the most incredible critters ever as a result of being in this space. Tell me a little bit about your personal giving and your family's giving. Is it something your son and your daughter involved in? Your wife? Is this like you talked about being retired and now you can give back? You sit on these boards. It's still a tremendous amount of work and responsibility, I'm sure. But I'm sure, you have a lot of demand signals in the world. But tell me a little bit about what the things that light you up most about giving back in this season of your life.
Sure. Okay, so when I left the company, and I think that there's a lot of people that really should think about this when they leave, and maybe your listeners aren't of my age at this point, but when they do, I actually stepped back and I said, how do I want to spend my time? And I decided that I wanted to spend a third of my time doing business stuff. In other words, I didn't want to give it up completely. I wanted to spend a third of my time doing what I consider charitable things. And then I wanted to spend a third of my time having more margin in my life and having more time to spend with people, including my wife and my kids, and frankly, other people who just want advice. And so, the boards, immediately I got called over time to go on 3 boards, and that probably takes a third of my time. Since then, on the if you will, the charity bucket, I became the chairman of the board of the organization I just described to you, Colorado Uplift, and I spent a meaningful amount of time trying to raise money, but also help the CEO of the organization outline the operations with strategy, and we're expanding within Colorado, and then also help kickstart the national movement as well, doing that. My wife and I are also very involved in bipolar disorder. My wife's father was bipolar, and we have given a considerable amount of time, treasure, and talent to CU Anschutz Medical Center in Denver, where we're focused on educating people, clinicians mostly, but also patients and families about how they detect bipolar disease. I was asked to join the board at Penn State University, and I joined the board at a very, very difficult time after one of the coaches, Jerry Sandusky, had committed child molestation, and it was a really, really tough time for the university. So I spent 9 years on the board trying to help the university. And the university is in great shape today, but when I joined 9 years ago, it was a little bit of a different place, and a lot of us worked really hard to sort of change that and turn that around. So I give of my time in a number of areas. The other thing, the last but not least, like you, I have a podcast show that takes place every month. It's called Off the Rack, and I interview leaders that I thought that I know lead with a heart, or that have led with a heart. Many of them are former CEOs, but I've had Stacey Lewis, who just won 14 LPGA tournaments, to Mike Nolan, who's a former coach of the San Francisco 49ers, to the president of Starbucks to the former CEO of Walmart on. And it's really, I mean, I'm in my third season with this. And what we're really trying to do is to get a message out into the market as to what good leadership looks like. And I think we've written over 500 blogs in the last 6 or 7 years. And it's been fun doing that. And I kind of do it just because I'm passionate about it. So I don't know. I touch a lot of different things. And there's no one thing that I spend all my time on, but I think it's important that we figure out how much time we're willing to allocate to various things in life and just go for it, because you know what? We're never too old.
I love it. I love that you're still using your keen mind and your great energy and your credible wisdom, and like still super engaged. I think a lot of people just kind of, I don't know. I just kind of, I garden and I travel and I golf, and I mean, that's great. That's their choice, but what a gift to humanity you are that you're just like all in and you're so actively engaged in the world and building so many beautiful relationships and blessing so many lives. Thank you so much for being you. Tell me a little bit while we on our kind of our last little bit wrapping up here. I'm curious about this Colorado Uplift and this passion of yours that you're, the chairman of the board and you've been so intricately involved in helping it go national. Where is it now nationally based? And do you have any program like this in Utah? I mean, I just moved back to Utah and I'm curious about your involvement in my state.
I don't know if they've opened up Salt Lake City or not. It's based in Denver. It's called Elevate USA. We didn't call the national organization Uplift. We decided to make it a different name for whatever reason, but we're all affiliated. And I'd have to look, but you can look it up, Elevate USA. And Elevate USA might be in Salt Lake City. I can't remember if Salt Lake City is on the map or not.
And how does an individual get involved in Elevate USA? And like, what does that look like? Maybe we've got a lot of really generous listeners and philanthropists and people that care about giving back in their community. What would they do to be involved? And how could they be invited in to being engaged?
Well, the CEO is Kevin Byerly. And if you looked up their website, Elevate USA, I'm sure there's a phone number there for him. In Colorado Uplift, the CEO is Joe Sanders, and they obviously we've got that website as well. I think if you lived in Salt Lake City and you really wanted to get this started, and we're not there, and I don't know that we're there yet. We look for about 4 or 5 passionate people to get it started, and we sort of provide them with the cookbook as to how to do it and help them hire the people and the like. But ultimately, we need probably 4 or 5 donors to really make it, kind of kickstart it and get it going. And we do this, by the way, in the public schools. The public schools are where help is needed. Where character is needed, where inner city kids have issues. It's all in the public schools, and we have got to turn our heads and focus on those kids, those people, and so that's how I would encourage anybody to get involved.
Amazing, Walt. Thank you. With your personal family giving, what is it that you hope when you shared the story about, thank you for sharing about your wife's father having bipolar and for the work you're doing there. I just went to a meeting yesterday with the Huntsman family, with the Huntsman Institute here. I met with David Huntsman and his team, his executive team. They've pledged $150 million for mental health, and they've been doing the most incredible work building like some of the best research, some of the best institutional university level, value for this sector. They also are building like an intake center where people can get a lot of help. In your estimation, getting really involved in particularly the diagnostics of bipolar, what is it that you hope is achieved most? Is it destigmatization? Is it more awareness? Is it more compassion? More intervention? Like, what are you guys learning and seeing there?
All of the above, except I would say our number one goal is being aware of it and detecting it. Because what happened with my wife is that her dad went years and years and years and nobody really understood him or understood it. And it caused it caused a lot of family issues, including divorce. And it wasn't until years after that that the family figured out, and he had a nervous breakdown. And so the family sort of figured out that he needed help many years before that. And instead of pointing at him, they really needed to point more at the problem. And the truth of the matter is they just didn't know as a family. And so what we're trying to do is early diagnostics. We're trying to increase awareness. And actually, we're really trying to we're focusing on clinicians, believe it or not just families, but clinicians, because many times general practitioners are the ones that kind of see it, but they're not really sure, because people are going in to get physicals, or they're going into, because they've got whatever, headaches, I don't know, something physical, and they would go into the clinician or the GP, and the GP needs to understand these are the things you're looking for. And so we're actually trying to educate online. We're trying to educate general practitioners now through what's called the Johnson Depression Center. And the Depression Center is part of CU Anschutz. And it's, I think we're making a lot of progress. I really do. We're really, really excited about it.
Amazing. Well, I'd love to introduce you to the Huntsman family and you guys collaborate, because there's so much need for communications to be shared in these different organizations so that we avoid redundancy or duplication, or just so that we can be more effective in our learnings, our insights, and our operations. The interesting part is in the private sector, there's this kind of decorum, may the best man win. There's this, like it's a sport, and it's like, okay, we're competing for the consumer dollar, the investor dollar, for the market share. But in the social sector, in social good, it's supposed to just be about the cause. We have a shared mission. So I am really a big fan of making sure we don't work in silos. And I think you'd really, really enjoy meeting this beautiful family. So Walt, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so grateful that you came on. Is there anything else you want to share, kind of as a last thing you want? I mean, you talked about your amazing book. Is there anything you want to share with the audience as kind of a last parting words?
Well, I guess I would just encourage all your listeners that as they lead people, they need to kind of put those people first, right? They need to make sure that their leadership is not about them anymore. And leadership is all about the people that you lead, and you kind of have to get out of your own way in some respects, and focus on them. Be humble. Be honest, and be human is kind of my takeaway in this whole thing. And I hope everybody remembers that as they lead their flock, if you will, in the future.
Thanks so much, Walt. The 3 H's, I'll never forget it. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you so much.
Oh, so great to be on with you, Lindsay. Take care now.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.